Last time on Steampunk Minecraft, we made a charcoal factory because we're on the quest to make gunpowder to craft an unlimited supply of TNT. To do this, we're finally combining all of our ingredients in one super center, the TNT factory. Join me as we go through the process of building this factory and unearthing the unholy power that is TNT. I hope you enjoy. This is the next episode of Steampunk Minecraft. You want to play mod packs with friends, but you can't seem to find a good server. And the free ones? With the big mod packs these days, free servers are just too laggy. Luckily for you, there's BISECT hosting. They host my server, and with plenty of affordable options, they can host your server too. And the best part is, they support almost every mod pack. Use code Doublesal at checkout for 25% off your first order. BISECT hosting, a great site for great servers. Welcome back. It's been a long road, but I think we're finally ready to start building our TNT factory right here. It's been quite a journey making gunpowder, but now that we have every ingredient, it's finally time to build the factory itself. I used my buzzsaw to chop down trees to prepare the build site, and then I went back to my workstation to go collect some materials, like this sandstone. I got some clay blocks, which I was going to turn into bricks, and to do this I was going to use a lava fan, but not before breaking up the blocks into clay balls. Not by hand, but with the help of my crusher. The only problem is that the crusher uses a ton of power, so I had to activate the generator, and once that was up and running, clay balls just popped out. With all the materials gathered, all I had to do now was go to the furnace and cook them up into bricks. And once I had my bricks, it was time to craft them into brick blocks. Now, I've been working on this project for a really long time, so I've had plenty of moments to meditate on what I wanted this build to look like, so it was time to tap into the inner crevices of my brain to build something that was explosively creative. Every good build has a great foundation, and with plenty of stone in my inventory, I was able to lay out a shape that would define the footprint of the entire build. And once you have the footprint, everything else falls into place. Now, at this point, I was a little iffy about the design, and to make things worse, a creeper decided to blow up the foundation. That's when I was struck with a wave of inspiration, so I took my new idea and began building at the end of the path. And this was going to be a far grander design than that which I had originally intended. Not only that, but this new design would better embody the concept of TNT than the old one. So I began building it with all the sandstone I had collected. The idea was to build this massive platform that would be carried by 4 massive creeper statues. The perfect mob that would go with our explosive theming, as creepers are known for only one thing: blowing stuff up. I began building the first creeper statue out of the sandstone that I had, and well, I was trying to go for this ruined monolithic look, something you'd find in ancient Egypt. So, once I finished the first creeper, all I had to do was copy the design and duplicate it on the right side for the second creeper. It was going to be a lot of work, but I had faith in the process. And once my 4 creeper statues were complete, well, the sooner I could start working on the actual TNT factory. Now, once the first statue was done, I had to design an elevator system so that I could actually get up there. So I used my trusty elevator block from a few episodes prior, and well, setting it up was pretty simple. If you want one, all you need is some gears as well as a water wheel to give it power. All you have to do is control the flow of the water, that way you don't have the mess that I just made, and after that you have to click it and it connects to the platform down below. You also have to add connectors to define each floor. For example, we have one at the bottom and one at the top for floor 1 and floor 2. Then you add a control panel and well, you're all set from there once you glue it together. With the elevator now complete, it was time to take it for a test ride, and once I pressed the button, I was ascending to the very top of my creeper statue. Now, if you're thinking that the elevator is slow, well, you're right, it is slow, but I wasn't in a rush to get anywhere. Plus, the top wasn't a real destination either. For that, we were going to have to do a lot of building because we still had to construct the platform for the actual factory itself. So I began by building these bridges between each creeper statue. Now, while I was doing that, some mobs caught my eye. These Nagas that kept spawning for some reason. I mean, I honestly think there's a spawner underground because every time I kill them, they keep spawning there. I don't know what the deal is. And here is the progress of the build so far, just 2 statues and a bridge between them. After that, it was time to construct a staircase that would take me to the top level. That's where I would place the massive TNT factory. And it was a simple staircase, just sandstone slabs that would be circling around a granite column. Once I had constructed the granite column, it was finally time to move on to phase 2. I wrapped up building the bridge between the 2 creeper statues, and once that was done, it was time to bring out an old friend, that being our trusty schematic cannon. You see, those 2 statues took way too long to build by hand. and honestly, I was in a rush because I wanted to build something else, the factory. So I decided to copy the statues with the blueprint, and then I began outlining the base for the other 2 statues that would make up the rest of the factory's foundation. Once I placed the previews down, all I had to do was supply the cannon with the materials as well as the gunpowder. I must have done this a dozen times, but I will never get tired of messing around with those hologram builds. They just look so interesting. Now, once the cannon was going, all I had to do was wait. But I'm a pretty impatient person, so I did go into the config of the Modpack and actually change the cannon speed. That is an option if you didn't know. But finally, the build was done! All I had to do was build the bridges between the creeper statues, and like that, the foundation would be nearly complete. We were on our way to building a beautiful TNT factory. So this is the progress so far with all of the statues now connected. All I had to do was add the finishing touches, that being the support columns between every bridge. And this is a little runaround of what it looked like. I hope you guys like the design, and this is it! The platform was finally complete. It would be the perfect spot for the creepers to carry a massive block of TNT on their heads. First, I had to put together some equipment. For this, I was gonna need a crusher. Maybe more than one crusher, I don't know, I'm making it up as I go. But this crusher was going to be important because it was going to grind up sandstone into sand, but the main thing we wanted was nitrate. So we were going to get that from this machine right here. Now at first it just looks like a random mesh of blocks, but when you click it with an engineer's hammer, all of the blocks assemble into this massive piece of equipment. And, I mean, this design is so detailed, you do not want to be caught between those 2 crushing thingies. Anyways, we finally had a crusher. But the crusher needed power, so I had to go back to the workshop to gather some wood and craft as many fence posts as I possibly could, because it was time to build some power lines. I went to the coke oven to go get some coal coke, and then I went to empty out the oven because it was full of this oil. And I disposed of the oil probably unsafely, and note to all of you Minecrafters out there, don't dive into a pool of oil, because when you do, well, you get a status effect that causes you to be flammable. Bad idea. Anyways, I crushed all of the coal coke into the crusher back at the workshop, and I was left with coke dust. Not the other one, this one is completely different. I combined the coke with the iron in an arc furnace, and once it was combined, well, you usually get steel. But in this case, we didn't want steel, we wanted the byproduct, slag. Now the reason we wanted slag was because when you melt slag down, you get these glass blocks, which was essential for making our power lines. So once I was able to melt down the slag and create my glass blocks, I then moved on to go craft the next item for the power line, that being these connectors. And well, for the connectors I needed aluminum, so I went to the caves to go mine some. Unfortunately, there wasn't that much ore to be found. Thankfully, I got really lucky because the ore I was looking for just so happened to be located right underneath the build site. So I mined some of that, then I went into another cave where I mined even more, and it was really dark, so I'm sorry if you can't see it, but yeah. I got the ore, I went back to the workshop, I threw it into the furnace, and it smelted into the beautiful, pristine aluminum ore that I needed. Then I crafted the connectors, and from there I was set to start assembling the power poles. The poles would be made out of the fence posts, and once the fence posts were complete, I could finally start doing all of the nice complicated wiring. Actually, I take that back, it's not that complicated, but yeah. I would add the connectors to the very top of the poles, and then I would run the wires between all of them. And that's what they would look like. They would be 10 blocks tall. I used some dirt so that I could run between each pole. Pretty simple stuff. And yeah, I just love the way the wires look when they get connected. It's just so satisfying to see a slope in a block game. Finally, I had run all the wires to the top of the creeper statue, and now it was time to connect it to the crushing machine. And once it was connected, all I had to do was flip on the on switch, and this puppy would come to life. The next step was to assemble a sandstone machine. So I began connecting some belts and a basin that would compress sand into sandstone. I even added some crushing wheels that would break down the cobblestone into sand. And yeah, it was a pretty simple setup. My main concern was making sure that it would be compact enough to fit into the frame that I would create for the outside of the building. You see, I was trying to build this big TNT block, and all of this had to fit inside of it. So here's how it works. Cobblestone gets broken up by some drills, it goes down the belt between the crushing wheels, and it comes out as sand. Now the sand travels down the belt until it enters a basin, and once it enters a basin, it's pressed into sandstone. The sandstone then goes into a chest where it comes out and goes into the crusher, and there's a small chance it makes nitrate. The next step was to fill this chest with sulfur, which I would create with a second crushing machine, and to do this, all I had to do was throw these blaze rods in, they would get pulverized, and out would come either blaze powder or sulfur. Now, there was a lot more blaze powder than there was sulfur being made, and we were going to have to remedy this issue because we were wasting a lot of blaze rods. The return rate wasn't that good. So what were we going to do with all this blaze powder? We were going to recycle it to make even more blaze rods. And to do that, I had a metal press. All I had to do was throw in the right amount of blaze powder, it would be crushed and formed into blaze rods, which I would then throw again into the crusher, and like that, we recycled. Finally, it was time to build the frame of the factory itself. With lots of red wool and white wool and a bunch of other colors, I was going to build a giant TNT block. And TNT blocks are pretty simple to build. I mean, there's not much going on there design-wise. And for the black parts in between, well, we would separate each bar of dynamite with some dark black windows. But that wouldn't only be our only view to the outside, because above us would be a massive glass ceiling that would allow plenty of sunlight to flow in. And once that was complete, so was the entirety of our TNT factory. A beautiful, powerful structure towering over all of the other buildings in the middle of our grand avenue. Now it was time for the final test. It was time to see if this factory was actually functional. So, in the middle of the night, I went to the factory because now it was time for me to craft some of the first blocks of TNT, but not before admiring that beautiful ceiling. Look at that pattern. I went onto the elevator, clicked the button, and ascended to the very top floor. First, let me give you a little walk around of the completed platform and foundation here. There's a view of our charcoal factory over there, menacing as ever. And here is the bridge. And this is stuff you've already seen, but you know what? It just looks so nice once it's all tied together, even with this massive block of TNT that we constructed. And this is the interior, nice and complete here. And as for the outside, well, if you walk around, there's this nice little walking area, complete with glass ceilings where you can look down below onto the foundation portion. And yeah, it's just a nice, lovely area to take a stroll, even though this is a place that will give birth to destructive weaponry. So now it was finally time to move on to the moment you've all been waiting for. It was time to make some gunpowder. The first step was to go to each factory and collect all the necessary materials, starting with the charcoal factory because, well, it's the closest. I went to the charcoal factory and circled around until I entered the side entrance, and there, awaiting in the inside of this complex building, was a lot of charcoal to be harvested. I collected a lot of charcoal, probably more than I needed, but you know what? Better safe than sorry. Next, it was time to enter the Nether, because waiting for me there was a large shipment of blaze rods that I would manufacture into sulfur. This was going to have to be a very quick trip, because I didn't have any of the cooling items I needed that would prevent me from overheating in this dimension. So once I got off the elevator, I sprinted to the chest where all of the items were being offloaded from the train. I collected my blaze rods, and from there my vision was getting hazy because I was about to have a heat stroke. My body temperature was rising, so I rushed. Unfortunately, the elevator was so slow. Probably gonna have to speed that up later, but yeah, I nearly passed out. Finally, the elevator got to the top. I ran to the portal, and once I was on the other side, my temperature began to lower again. Thank God I survived. Anyways, I now had all of the ingredients I needed. I went to the elevator with a blaze rod and charcoal in my hands, and now it was finally time to process these items. Blaze rods went in, sulfur came out. Once that was done, it was time to make some sand for the gunpowder itself, as well as producing some nitrate, which we had a nice stockpile of by this point. I collected some sulfur, and now it was finally time to combine all the items. Charcoal, nitrate, sulfur into gunpowder. We had stacks of it, and now it was finally time to craft a legendary block, which I failed the first try, but the second try I got it right. A little confusing, but there it is. TNT! Finally, it's been multiple episodes, but we have the legendary Minecraft block. And now it was time to do something special with it, because I don't just want to use it in its raw form. So it was time to process it into something else. To do this, I needed arrows, which required feathers, so I had to sacrifice some of the chickens at the power plant, and well, you know, chickens die, they drop feathers, which I collected, and once I had my feathers, I crafted all the arrows I possibly needed, more probably. And yeah, I combined the arrows around some TNT to make these explosive arrows. I made a bow, that way I could launch them, and honestly, I had no idea how this was gonna work. Would they just explode as soon as I fired them? Well, it was time to find out. I shot the arrow, and nothing happened aside from a few smoke particles, so I decided to take it a step further and place some TNT. Maybe it would ignite it, and nothing happened. So there was only one last thing for me to try. I was just gonna have to shoot the arrow at a mob. Any mob would do. So it was off to find the random mob of the day, and finally, after some wandering, I came across this guy just sleeping on some rocks. It was finally time to see if these arrows were effective. So I drew the bow, launched the arrow, and well, he blew up. That was not what I was expecting, but here's an instant replay of the same scenario again. This guy just went flying. So yeah, it looks like we had a pretty effective weapon that we could probably utilize for a future project. That's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing and follow me on Patreon for this build that will be available for download. Thank you so much. Have a great day.